put this up here to put in context what he's going to teach us about light pollution. If his astronomical achievements as a telescope maker and with his own observatory and what he does in astronomy, if those items were listed up here, I think the list would be of equal length. So those of us who remember when dark sky concerns really started to gain some traction, the biggest sell, I mean, we all realized from the get-go you couldn't go and tell people we need to do something about our lighting because we're going to lose our dark sky. We all knew that wouldn't go anywhere. But when it was discovered that there were some actual health aspects associated with mitigating excess of light, and new terms like light trespass came into our vocabulary. But Mario has continued to show that there are some very long range and interesting consequences, and serious ones, if we are exposed to excess light. Of course, we thought that LEDs were going to solve so many of our light issues, and that just opened a whole new can of concerns. So please help me welcome the return of Dr. Mario Motta.
So light pollution affects amateur astronomers, and we're all familiar with it. And if you're not familiar with it, why are you at an astronomy convention? So I'm not going to talk about how it affects amateur astronomy. That much I hope you know, or you wouldn't be here. I'm going to give you reasons why light pollution is bad for us other than astronomy. And my only regret is more professional astronomers don't get in the fray. There are a few, but very few professional astronomers are involved with light pollution control, to their shame. A lot of amateurs are activists, and I'm very grateful for that. But I approach it from a medical aspect, and I'm responsible for the American Medical Association adopting as policy the reasons why we should be controlling light pollution, and that's been effective in many fights around the world. So let me skip all that and move on. Okay, so dirty little secret. This is why I'm really interested in light pollution. But of course, I'll talk more about other reasons. Whoops, wrong way. Hold on. No, there we go. Went the wrong way. Okay, and this is my home observatory. It's a 32-inch f6.5, which I enjoy greatly, and I want to keep the skies dark for that reason. One of my recent photos, this is day 91. In fact, I was in the November issue of Sky and Cal. So, but I'm going to talk about medical reasons why light pollution is bad for us. I'm not going to give a medical talk. I'm giving a talk, it seems, on light pollution every month for the last several months, and I got a talk lined up every month until February. Just gave a talk to the Houston Astronomical Society. So I try to vary the talk depending on the audience. Again, this audience I hope would know why the sky should be dark for us, but I'm going to give you other reasons why it's there. So back in the late 80s, Richard Stevens, who was an epidemiologist at the University of Connecticut, trying to figure out why breast cancer was increasing in Western countries, but not in places like Africa, China, or India. And it puzzled him, because the theory back then was, well, it had to be air pollution and toxins in the environment, but that didn't make any sense. What was more polluted than any other place on Earth than China at the time? Yet they had the lowest rate of breast cancer. Yet children or people from China who immigrated to the US quickly caught up to the US rates of breast cancer. So that told him it had to be something completely different. And this is one of his slides from back then. And he noticed that, he noticed back then that North America had the highest and China had the lowest. And it seemed, when he looked at this, it finally struck him that the degree of light pollution was directly proportional to the degree of cancers. And thank you. Degree of, and it went up and up, and this directly matched the degree of light pollution, which was kind of interesting at the time. So, there are many others. So anyways, I started working with him and I got intrigued. I was a medical research at the time, in addition to doing my medical practice. And we started looking at different studies. I mean, he did some of the original studies. I was kind of just a hanger-on, but we started collaborating quite a bit. And I started collecting studies. Back then, there were a handful of studies, more in the 2000s. And now there are literally thousands and thousands of studies. I'm going to show you some of those studies, not to make you medical researchers, but just to make you understand. This is not theory. When you have 22 studies on human breast cancer, increase in light pollution, you have to say this is pretty well proven, and it is. In fact, the Nobel Prize was awarded for that. So the most polluting are lamps with blue emission, like metal halide LEDs, and 60% of the world lives under light polluted skies now. The map of the world light pollution. I mean, China now has quite a bit of light pollution. And of course, their breast cancer rate has gone up. This is how much we waste in terms of energy. This is another aspect to look at. So $7 billion annually wasted, not the light that hits the ground, that's subtracted out, because we use those lights, but all the light that goes sideways and up is a $7 billion waste. Here's New England. Sad to say we're down here right now. So I don't have to tell you what the skies are like. I'm fortunately out in this little peninsula, which no one pays attention to, Cape Ann rather than Cape Cod, but it's quite a bit darker than the rest of Boston area. So how does light pollution affect human health? It affects circadian rhythms, and that's the main reason. Light pollution, especially blue light, suppresses a hormone that's produced by your pineal gland, right in the center of your brain, called melatonin. Why is that important? Melatonin helps regulate all the other hormones in the body. And therefore, it's not surprising that endocrine-related tumors, like breast cancer, prostate, thyroid, all the others that are endocrine-related, will be affected because melatonin has effects on all of those hormone systems. And let me start from the outset. Light doesn't cause cancer, okay? That's not the issue. The issue is that if you suppress your melatonin, melatonin is a really important hormone. At night, while you sleep, your body cleans up all the bad cells that have been produced. We make literally billions of cells every single day. Okay, cells divide and replace, like your gut. All the cells are replaced every 3 or 4 days. Your blood, all the cells are reproduced about once a month. So we die if we didn't do that. But if you have billions of divisions every single day, it's no stretch of the imagination that occasionally there's going to be a mistake. Most of those mistakes won't survive, they immediately die. Some of those will survive and survive in a way that they could reproduce themselves ad infinitum. Those are called cancers. What happens is, at night, while you sleep, you have T killer cells and other adjuvant cells that go around the body, recognize these abnormal cells and kill them. Okay, so every person in this room produces 10 to 20 cancer cells every single day of your life. It's just part of human biology. That's okay, we kill them off. Later in life, in your 70s, 80s, and 90s, your immune system starts to diminish. That's why older people tend to develop cancers, because our immune system isn't as strong. If you're even in younger life, though, if you suppress melatonin, melatonin acts as an adjuvant to the immune system. By adjuvant, I mean it helps the immune system work better. There's a huge biochemical pathway for that. I'm not going to go into that. That's a medical school talk. But if you know that melatonin improves our immune system while you're asleep, now you understand why if melatonin is suppressed, the immune system works just a little bit less efficiently, and occasionally one of those 10 to 20 cancer cells will slip through and start dividing. That's the basic mechanism of how light pollution affects human cancers. Okay, so it's not that much of a leap of the imagination to understand that. Oh, I should have, but in addition to cancers, it affects endocrine-related carcinomas, colorectal cancers, sleep, mood, and depression should be obvious. Obesity and diabetes goes up if you're in light polluted areas. And if your diabetes goes up, you have increased coronary events and strokes, and glare creates dangerous conditions. So, and then there's the environmental issues. So there are a number of effects of light pollution beyond not being able to see the night sky very well. So here's the hormone. It's a very primitive hormone. Even amoeba make melatonin, believe it or not. Every animal on Earth makes melatonin. It's one of the most primitive hormones. And in mammals, at least, it works the way I'm going to describe it for humans. In different animals, it works in different ways. So melatonin and how it affects human health is from immunomodulation, and that's because it affects T cell and B cell activity. That's the activity at night that helps you clean up bad cells. If you think this is pie in the sky in theory, the Nobel Prize in medicine in 2017 went to Hall, Robash, and Michael Young for determining the biochemical pathway of how this all works. All right. So when I have lighting engineers complain to me, oh, you know, you just said, this has actually happened after we published our the AMA reports back in 2012 and 2016 on how light pollution is bad for human health. You wouldn't believe the hate mail I got from some light companies. Seriously, some of them was like threatening hate. They'll say, and one of them was basically, you're just a bunch of doctors, stay in your lane. You're not engineers, you don't know what you're talking about. So it was kind of like when, well, I won't get into it, but I thanked some of those emails just because it was such hate email from these lighting engineers. So what I basically tell them says, you know, why don't you go argue with the Nobel committee, because they think it's important enough to give the Nobel Prize for it. Okay, so being humans, we have variation in how we respond to everything. So Phillips in Netherlands, Schlager, his name, he showed that there's human variation. Some of us are low sensitivity, some of us are extremely high sensitivity to light pollution. Most of us are in the middle, but that was a good slide that showed why some of us are much more affected by light pollution than others. So here's the problem. There's no such thing as a white LED, okay? And that's the key here, because what we have is a blue LED that's coated by phosphors that absorb the high energy emission from the blue LED and then re-radiate it out into a lower spectrum that's useful. The problem is, depending on the manufacturer, more or less of the blue penetrates through. And it's the blue that's primarily the issue here. Blue affects your melatonin 10 times more than red. All light, if it's bright enough, will affect your melatonin. But at the same lux, blue will affect it 10 times more. So ideally, we would do what people in southern Quebec do, and they use amber LEDs, and they have zero blue. We don't have any US manufacturers, believe it or not, that do that. But that's what southern Quebec has done, and they love it. I'll give you an example of that later. The old high pressure sodium were in this range, anywhere from 1800 to 2200. The 5000 K LED emit 40% blue. Those are the lights that you go like this when you see them. You don't realize how bad they are until you have to live near one. And most of us are now exposed to 3,000 to 4,000. 4,000 is still 31% blue, and the 2,700 is about 15% blue. At a minimum, we should be going to 2,700. When you see them side by side, it becomes clear the difference between a 6,000. I mean, I'm used to now looking at them. I can tell you the color of an LED by looking at it. But this is what a 6,000 K, 4,000, 3,000, and 2,000. They all look white. So individually, if you saw them on the screen, except for these that burn your eye out, They would all just look like ordinary white light, but there's a clear difference in color spectrum between them. So here's the problem. This is what we want. Okay, a broad spectrum that allows you good night vision. The problem is they all have that inner core blue LED, and depending on the manufacturer, a huge amount of blue or not so much blue penetrates through. In general, though, the higher the CCT value, that is 5,000K, 4,000K, the more blue peeks through. So 2,700 is the blue peak right here. And if you go to 5,000 LED, the blue peak is here. Okay, we want none of that to penetrate through ideally, which an amber LED does not, and all of the light to be here. And why is this a problem? Around 2003, a brand new cell in the retina of the eye was discovered called the RPG, and it is a blue sensitive cone that is only sensitive to light at about 4,500. Extremely blue, basically the color of the sky early morning when it's a clear blue sky with no light, no clouds. Okay, and that's all it detects is there. Now a color spectrum and all the others are kind of spread out. That particular new cell that was just discovered does not go to the visual cortex in the back of your eye that allows you to see. It has nothing to do with vision. It goes to the pineal gland. And the whole purpose of that is, one, to suppress your melatonin, because we evolved when sun rises, we're supposed to get up. So the blue light now wakes you up, and that's what it does. It affects the reticulum system of the brain and basically tells the brain, wake up, it's daylight. And it suppresses the melatonin, which generally tends to make you sleepy. So that all basically gets you ready for the day, gets you going, which is all good and well, except now that we live in a modern society with lights on all the time at night, that system never shuts off if you're in a high blue light environment. Picture of M81. This is an astronomy group, right? Got to show it occasionally. All right, so let's talk just a few minutes about glare. This one should be self-obvious. Human eye and pupil. When you're young, teens, preteens, your pupil can dilate to 7 millimeters easily. As you get older, it kind of stops at 6, 7 millimeters. But the whole purpose of the pupil is to allow light in. And in a dark environment, it dilates fully, and that's what you want when you're dark adapted. You want to go out and look at a nice galaxy. But if there's ambient light around, it shrinks. Why is that important? Because if the pupil shrinks down, if you have a hot light source, let's say a bright light from a business along a road or a too intense street light, the pupil's going to constrict. So instead of being 5 and 6 millimeters, so you can see the road pretty well, your pupil constricts to the brightest source going into it. So if you have a direct light shining into your pupil, it constricts down, and now everything looks dark except for that light. And what's the natural human response to something like that? Well, we need more lights. So people start adding all these lights along the road because they think the road is too dark. No, it's incredibly stupid engineering that allows bad lights to shine in your eye. Okay, the better way is you shield the lights so you don't have that reaction, and now the road suddenly looks much better lit. And the problem, is this way the human eye works, and you have a lens which focuses the light to the back of your eye. Here's an actual human eye cut in half. Here's lens, vitreous humor, which is basically a jelly-like substance that pulls your eyeball out, and then the retinas along the back of the eye. As you get older, a flaw develops. Generally in your 40s, you start noticing that you don't accommodate, you start needing reading glasses, and at the same time, you start having glare problems that become worse and worse, and eventually you develop cataracts. Why is that the case? The human eye has a design problem. We weren't designed to live to 9 years old. We're designed to procreate, and then die for the next generation at a young age. When you live past 50, the central part of well, first of all, the lens has no blood vessels. That's a problem if you want living cells. It gets all its nutrients from the liquid around the lens. It diffuses in oxygen and the sugars it needs to keep these cells alive. And every year, a new layer, kind of like tree rings, grows around the lens. Eventually, in your 40s, the lens is thick enough that the diffusion isn't that good to the center of the lens anymore. Okay, God made an error here. So what ends up happening is cells in the center of the eye start to die. And whenever a cell dies and is retained by the body, it tends to calcify. Now you have microcalcifications, that you have a bright light go in the eye that scatters off these microcalcifications. And eventually, over another 20, 30 hours, it eventually coalesces and you have a cataract. So young and healthy, even in a bright light, you get some scattering glare. But if you're my age, this is what you see. Okay, this is why older people have trouble driving at night. It's not because you can't see, it's because we have such lousy engineering that the light blinds you. Not taking into account human physiology. So I've given talks to the Engineering Society of North America and others, and basically I face them and say, listen, the reason why people can't drive at night is not because their eyes are bad, it's because you don't take into account human physiology and you're really bad engineers. I tend to be like this mic in the so when you're young, in your 20s, this is how much light, 2000 Lamberts can cause what we call visibility glare, meaning glare so bad you can't see the environment well. By the time age 60, it only takes 1/3 of that. That's because of the microcalcifications, and it just gets worse and worse with age. Person who did it, I may block another name, I should have put his name here. Anyways, this is from the Netherlands as well. He took human cadaver eyes and basically shined, this is a log scale, through the eyes and showed, not surprisingly, blue scatters the most, red scatters the least. We all know that as amateurs. That's why the sun turns red as it sets. The red penetrates, the blue light scatters. That's why the sky is blue. But in humans, that means that blue light, if it enters your pupil at night, scatters the most. That's what causes the glare. All light, if it's intense enough, will cause disability glare. But blue light, which is 10 times more prevalent in these 3000 K lights than red light, is what causes the problem with drivers. So if you have a dirty windshield, it's the same thing as, versus a shielded light, you can see much better. People worry about safety. Well, typical wall pack, you can't see a thing beyond the wall pack. Shielded wall pack, and suddenly you can see. That's why all light should be shielded. The whole purpose of a light is to bounce a photon off what you want to see, and that goes into your eye. If the light goes directly from the light source into your eye, all it does is blind you. It doesn't help you see one iota. So here's from Quebec. Let me borrow this slide. So look down the road here. They have this intense light because it's an intersection. Can you see anything? No. Now, there's a person standing right here, and all he did was step forward 10 feet. So if you're driving along a highway at 60 miles an hour, there's no way in the world you're going to avoid an accident. There's a car parked there, a person in the road, or a deer or a moose. That's what causes accidents, excess glare. I did that when I was trying to convince my town of Gloucester to change lights. I actually basically just asked for simple things. Give me the intersections that have the most accidents. They gave me that data. And there was one place near the center of town that had 19 accidents over 4 years. Turned out there was a big glare bomb shining into the intersection. And I just said, this is why. They finally took that down. Accident rate went way down. These kind of lights are bad. Too many point sources. France banned them, by the way. So in Gloucester, we went from high pressure sodium to LEDs. But here's another thing you got to do. See 19? That's the number of wattage. So it's 19 watts. Why is that? It sounds too low and most city councils don't get it. So the lighting company will take down the 60 watt high pressure sodiums and say, we'll give you spot 50 watt LEDs. Sounds good. They're gonna save a little bit of money. The problem is for LEDs give 4 times more light watt per watt than a high pressure sodium. So a 60 watt high pressure sodium means you should have a 15 watt LED. This is the lowest they made at the time of Motta. So that's what they put up. So a little bit of a fight trying to convince it down. But many towns across the country get put up these 50 watt LEDs. Suddenly you have 4 times more light than you started with. And every intersection is something you gotta do this for. And so if you're talking to your town council, remind them of the 4-to-1 rule if they're changing the lights. So here's a typical street, and after it was converted to proper LEDs with shielding. It's much easier to drive on this road than that road. Oh, I forgot, I had this slide in. So here's a church in Prospect, at Pleasant Street in Gloucester. And here's a church here, St. Anne's Church, and have a school next to it. So they put up this security light. Okay, and as I pointed out to the town, I gave them a presentation, you could have an army robbing this school, you never know it, because you can't see them because the light's shining in. They have a light here to actually light the intersection. It never goes on. You know why? Because of this, the light sensor on it always thinks it's daylight, so it never shines. So the only light in the center of the intersection is a square bomb. They had 19 accidents here over 4 years. They finally got rid of this with a shielded light. Accident rate went way down. The IAS gave me a lot of grief about lights, so I used their own data against them. This is by I meant to block them, it's name. Anyways, this is from IAS member from Virginia Tech. And he showed that the 6,000 K LEDs actually allowed you to see worse than the 3,000 LED and worse than the high pressure sodium because of the glare effect. And some shielded ones you can actually see. It doesn't make any bit of difference what the color temperature was. You can see well all the way down the road. So then the engineers argue, well, you need to be able to see color, as if they really cared when we were using high pressure sodium. They only care because they're paid by the lighting company to come up with ideas to sell you lights. So here's what the color rendition is with the 1870, which is high pressure sodium. The difference between 3,000 and 5,000 K is insignificant. Okay, the color rendition is perfectly fine. So what do we mean by wasted light at $7 billion? This is what you really want. Light has to bounce off something for you to see something. Light that goes up into space doesn't help you one bit. So you should shield the lights. Many people say, well, you need the lights. We all know you need more lights to prevent crime. Basically BS. Okay, I've been asking for 30 years from a lighting company to give me data. I'm a scientist. Give me data that shows more lights means less crime. In 30 years, I've challenged every time I speak to engineers, not once in 30 years have they given me a study, other than ones published by the lighting company, which have no scientific validity whatsoever. Okay, so there are many reports by independent researchers that show the exact opposite, which is why you never hear these from the lighting companies. So property crime rates with respect to LED intensity. So for every 1% increase in the intensity of LEDs corresponds to a 0.1% increase in property crime rates. Okay? You won't hear that from the lighting companies. The Chicago alleyway lighting project, this one is one of my favorites. So Chicago, back in the early 2000s, got this humongous grant. They were going to cut down crime by lighting up every alleyway. Sounds good, right? So they got a grant, part of it by Illinois, part of it by the feds. And they started out this project. They ran out of money 2/3 of the way through. So 1/3 of the alleyways were still, in their opinion, dark. 2/3 were lit up like the surface of the sun. Okay? No, seriously, they put up these humongous high LEDs that were 4,000K and all way overlit. You could read, a newspaper without having a. Anyways, the bottom line is, so they did all this, and then about 5 years later, University of Chicago, I forget which section, but they dealt with crime, decided this would be a perfect study finally to show how good we light up everything in the world. That crime would go down. So they lit up all the alleyways, and they went from 90 watt bulbs to 250 watts. I mean, these are really overlit alleyways. If you ever go to Chicago, look down some of the alleyways, you need sunglasses. Okay, so the program is to increase the feel and safety and decrease crime in the alleys, except now they studied it. Wherever they lit up, the crime rate went up. Wherever it was not lit up, the crime rate went down. The exact opposite of what they wanted to prove. And this got published. So whenever we go to an engineering talk, I always show the slide and say, whatever you believe, forget about it. This is the truth. And there are many other studies. They all show pretty much the same thing. Whenever you increase the lighting in general, the crime rate goes up. There are now 20 studies about school systems. Schools, we got to protect the vandalism in the high schools. So they put up all these security lights. Crime rate always goes up. Vandalism rate goes up. Basically, teenagers are like moths. You put up lights, so they go. That's true. You cut down the lights or put them on motion sensors. The kids find someplace else to hang out because they're not going to hang out in the dark. So the crime rate goes down. It took a long time for school systems to finally catch it on. England has published a number of crime statistics because they care about the issue, unlike the US, which kind of keeps trying to suppress it. So little evidence of harmful effects. The switch off lighting and road collisions also go down when you switch off the lights. 14 years of data by 62 local authorities, no convincing evidence of association between street lighting and road traffic accidents. So England at least is convinced. They've actually done multiple studies. So switch off, it didn't make much of a difference, but if anything, the trend was it's better off if you cut down the lights. Part-time light, meaning they're at a certain dimness early in the evening, then they dim them down further. You're better off if you do that. Crime, again, slightly to the left. Part-time light, slightly to the left. There was one city that was out of place. I can never figure out why. But overall, the trend is you're much better off if you cut down the lights. Brighter street lights don't prevent accidents. In fact, they may do more harm than good. These are all studies. I'm not, just saying these. Everything I say, I have to, as far as I'm concerned, I have to prove the study or I'm not going to say it. Demand out of any lighting talks from lighting companies, by the way. You'll be shocked because they won't be able to say a word most of the time. So no evidence is found for bright lights lead to improvement in road safety. Study after study after study. No evidence of association between reduced lighting and nighttime collision crossing on the wheels. And in general, when they surveyed the public, they're in favor of street lighting. Anyways. So next came the LCD revolution. And some cities were early adopters like Queens, New York, Seattle. So Queens started putting up 4,000K LEDs. And people 3,000K, 4,000K, what's the difference? They're just lights. In Hill, you have to live next to them. And immediately as they were starting to be put up, the New York Times got flooded with complaints by citizens saying, this is horrible, can't sleep at night, it's shining in our bedrooms, and the lighting comes, dark shades. My response to that is, why should everyone in the world put up dark shades because you are such damn bad engineers? Really? Shield them, and you don't have to do any of that. And don't put up 4,000K lights. So eventually they stopped the project and they started putting up 3,000K, the complaint rates went down. Since then, some of the early adopters for 4,000K lights have completely changed their tune. So Seattle put them up in 2010. Where is it? 3 years ago, they hated them so much, talked to the people who live in Seattle, that they voted to replace them all, even though they had another 15-year lifespan to go. They just taken them all down and putting up either 2,700 or 3,000, depending on the location.
Are they putting up those lights with shielding too?
Yes, shielded 2,700s, side streets, 3,000 main streets. And Pittsburgh just last year voted to do the same thing. All these towns basically got the message. So they're taking down all these 4,000K lights. Unfortunately, the lighting company's taking them back and they're either shipping them to Africa and India or shipping them to small town USA because people in the small towns don't know any better. And they say, we'll give you these lights practically for free. That they don't tell them because no one else in the world wants them. Okay, so they sell them those lights and then people are left with 4,000K lights they can't stand. So what I would stress is don't make the mistake of all these cities that put up 4,000K lights that are now taking them all down because now you have to pay for them twice. Put up the proper lights to begin with. Some states have, Rhode Island does have a light pollution law, although it's very weak. Connecticut has the world's best, by the way. They even cover
Who has
private
the
homes.
best? Connecticut has the best?
Yeah. They passed one of the early light pollution laws and just 5-6 years ago strengthened it. So Leo Smith is a main driver of that in Connecticut. Oops. And by the way, this is 3,000K. You can see color emissions perfectly fine. Then there are other cities that went one step further. Davis, he said, all right, well, the city council said, if you really want these other lights after we put them all up, then we can't afford them. The townspeople actually voted themselves a tax increase, not for schools, but to replace the lights. Okay, how often do you hear that happen? That's how much people hate living under 4,000K lights. They're often, you don't realize it until you have to live next to them. Monterey actually sued their own city council because they ignored their advice and put up 4,000K lights, and they won the lawsuit. Because California has this, you have to put an environmental impact. They completely ignored it and put up bad lights. This is Chelmsford and 2,700 lights, perfectly well lit. And it's even, doesn't have that harsh glare. You can see better with that. And here's another famous thing that I love to put up. So I've gone to meetings where some light engineer says, well, the moon is 4,000K. We know that, so you're lying. I mean, if the moon gives 4,000K, what's wrong with 4,000K lights? So I put this slide up now every single time just to forestall that kind of stupid question. Here's a spectrum of the moon. Do you notice something different in 4,000K lights? The engineers completely ignore the blue light that shines through. Okay, this is a 4,000K light. This is moonlight. So I say, yeah, this part is the same, but you're ignoring this. They're not the same. And there's the economic impact. So outdoor lighting, this is 2010, equals this much gallons of gasoline wasted. What time do I get to?
We're good.
Oh, yeah, we're good. 3:10.
Yes.
Give me a warning, okay, like with 15 minutes. So cost for residential streetlight, it's practically insignificant in terms of differences. Light pollution equals air pollution. Should, you know, for every kilowatt is this much light pollution, I mean environmental pollution, and 4 equals how much CO2, 60 billion kilowatts wasted. Is this much CO2, sulfur, and nitrogen oxide. So to keep, put it in different terms, 100-watt incandescent light, dusk till dawn for a year is half a ton of coal. This is my view of the Triffid. Okay, so World Health Organization recognized this early on, And they have proof of causation because around 2009, the studies now are showing that light pollution does equal cancers. And so they as far back as then, said light pollution is a group 2A carcinogen. To put things in perspective, smoking is still listed as a group 2A carcinogen. So it's the same level of proof. It's all epidemiologic proof. The only way you can get to group 1 is like benzene. I make you drink a little benzene, you're gonna develop cancer. Benzene is extremely toxic. But for most cancers that are in group 2A, they work over a number of years. So because of all that, I was fortunate to be elected to the AMA Council on Science and Public Health for 8 years. And I first got the AMA to adopt shielding is an important issue. And that's still policy because of driving safety. 2012, we wrote a very long paper. I was able to elicit the support of some of the world's best researchers, Blast from Tulane, Brainerd from Tom Jefferson, Walkley from Harvard, and well, I'm there too, but Gibbons, Virginia Tech. And we were able to put together, and Richard Stevens, of course, we were able to put together a very long paper, which you can download, by the way, from my website if you want it, which basically lays out the papers up to that point, why light pollution is bad for human health, and then I can download it. But it supports, at the time, it supports the reduced glare and supports the need for the studies, but basically says light in the bedroom at night from outdoors is a bad thing. Lighting industry completely ignored it, not one peep, and we're at around the mid 2015 years. They were basically buying up tons and tons of LEDs, prepared to go into the market and convince every town in the country, take down the high pressure sodium, will give you these much more efficient LED lights. You'll be so much better off. You're gonna save money. Everything will be roses. What they completely ignored was the health effects. So we published the report in 2016. And the main reason was because the industry completely ignored the health effects of what they were about to do. And because of that, when this paper came out in 2016, Chicago was about to replace all 275,000 streetlights. They had a contract all drawn up with Siemens. And Siemens, smelling that they were gonna make billions in profits, literally brought shiploads of 4,000K lights from China cheaply, and they had them stored in warehouses, and they were going to market them to every city in the country. Okay, I considered that a threat. This is why this paper got published. Chicago, the AMA is based in Chicago. Someone told them about this, and they pay attention since Chicago is based in the AMA is based in Chicago. And they said, well, we're not sure we can buy that, but we'll do our own research. So they did. And by the way, all AMA papers have to go through peer review through 5 universities before we publish even a word. And every word's got to be fact checked. So I'm confident of what I'm saying. So they did their own research, credit to the City Council of Chicago, and basically came up with the exact same thing. So they basically went to Siemens, who ripped up the contract, and said, we want 3,000K or less. Siemens didn't have any 3,000K. They bought nothing but 4,000K from China. So Siemens, at that moment, lost a $1.1 billion contract and went to several other companies. So needless to say, if you mention my name to any CEO from Siemens, it will get a swear words linked to my name. I kid you not. You wouldn't believe the messages I got from them. So anyways, so the final conclusion, it's still AMA policy, is these issues. We support switching to LEDs to save energy. No question, that's not a problem. But we encourage minimizing blue-rich light, and we encourage use of 3,000K or lower. And by the way, that or lower was in anticipation that the technology would improve over time. But the lighting companies only stop here. They forget about the whole rest of this. So they should be properly shielded and should use as low as CCT as possible. Blue light is what causes the problem for vision. But in addition, excessive blue light at night can damage the retina. Numerous studies have. By the way, after the this study came out, you notice how your iPhone dims itself after 9 o'clock at night? They read the AMA report 6 months later. Apple adopted that based on that report. And now, unfortunately, TV screens don't and computers don't. You have to specifically make it happen. This is my view of M51. Again, this is the real reason I'm interested. Don't let that out. People think I'm a medical researcher. For the AMA, I represented them at Dark and Quiet Skies, which is a World Health Organization under the UN proposal to limit light pollution. And we worked on that for 2 years. We were supposed to go to the Canary Islands. The first, this is 2020, and then COVID came out, so it got canceled the following year. I had my tickets, I had my hotel on the island, and 1 week before the volcano erupted. So 2 years in a row, we had to do it by Zoom, which really irks me. So anyways, but it dealt with a number of things, including protecting astronomical observatories, satellite constellations, Dan Elon Musk, protection for radio astronomy, dark sky oasis, and light pollution. This is the section I was involved with. So I represent the AMA on this, and here's the section on environmental effects and human health. My name's just somewhere here. That was a worldwide collaboration. And basically, we pointed out that circadian regulation is crucial for normal and malignant cell growth. 5 to 10% of all your genes are controlled by what we call clock genes. That was a very dependent on the time of day. So it's no stretch of the imagination. If you screw that up, there's going to be a problem. You notice that most when you get jet lag, that's because of the clock gene interruption. But there's a lot more to it than that. So if you get less sleep, if you get bad sleep, you have more fatigue, you tend to eat more, you tend to gain weight for reasons that are not clear, and you tend to have worse diabetes, and then that leads to further atherosclerosis. That's all proven now. So back then, there was a theory that way back to Richard Stevens that he hypothesized, if what I'm saying is true, then shift workers are at higher risk, blind women would have lower risk, and lighted bedrooms would increase risk, and long sleep lowers risk. Since then, hundreds of papers have proven every one of these true. So there's just one of the study. I mean, I can show you study after study. It's not just, this one is just an amazing study. They looked for twin women around the world, and one of them blind and one of them not. I don't know how they found that many of them, but there were twin women, one blind, one not. In the United States, if you were one who could see, you were 1.7 times more likely to develop breast cancer than your sister who was blind. And that same environment, same parents, same everything, except one could see and one couldn't. Sweden, the difference is 1.2, Finland 1.5, Norway 1.56. So that was an important study back then. Even though I'm a cardiologist, I got a paper in breast cancer, but it was really Richard Stevens who did most of the writing that he wanted to include me in the paper with the others. And that was one of the first papers in Journal of Cancer on how light pollution can affect human health. So light pollution and cancer, let's talk a little bit about that. I still doing good in time. Good. So light pollution and cancer. These are some of the more recent studies, and studies from 2020 and onward. The original AMA paper is now a little bit dated, but I want to update. So clinical studies demonstrate a significant association between artificial light at night and breast cancer, and a modest relationship between light at night and other cancers. 2020 International Journal of Molecular Science. Melatonin, buffering the immune system. Data reviewed in this paper support the idea of melatonin as an immune buffer, acting as a stimulant under basal or immunosuppressive conditions, or as an anti-inflammatory compound in the presence of exacerbated immune response. I'm not trying to turn you into physicians. I just want you to understand these are all published papers, peer reviewed. This is established science now. Don't let anyone tell you different. Melatonin immune function. Well, this is back in 2005, but it's a good study that shows the interaction of granulocytes and macrophages and bad cells and how they get killed off. Immune system and cancer 2015, melatonin elicits oncostatic properties, meaning it suppresses cancers. Light at night and risk of breast cancer. This is a meta-analysis of like 25 papers, and basically, 17 papers, sorry, in this one. Eligible studies from up to September 2021, and basically it showed everything I'm telling you, that you have increase in light at night in your bedroom, you're gonna have increased rate of breast cancers. Outdoor artificial light at night, breast cancer, in Black and white women, and it's even worse in Black women, probably because they tend to live in inner cities and you have worse light pollution there. So here's one of my favorite studies when I had some hand in the longitudinal nurses study, followed 110,000 women. And it was a beautiful study from 89 to 2013. They didn't just look at light at night, they looked at a whole bunch of issues that would affect women. But the part where they looked at was they broke up the women into quintiles. That is 1/5 of the women who lived in highly light polluted areas like the center of cities, 1/5 that were in rural areas, and then 1/5 each in increasing light pollution all the way up to the inner city. The difference between rural and center of city, there was a 14% increase in breast cancer. They correlated that with satellite images of that zip zone, that zip code, with the amount of light pollution where they live. So amount of light pollution based on satellites, that is the light that's coming up from the ground. Wherever you looked, there was an increase in breast cancer. That's pretty strong evidence. Now, you'd say, well, what, does the center cities have pollution? That was all accounted for. This is strictly based on light pollution. And that got published in 2017. Still a landmark study. Unless you think that was unique, 22 studies have corroborated that since. The nurses study had a 14% increase. Since then, multiple studies from Israel, worldwide, Connecticut, South Korea, they all came up with anywhere between 13 and 17% increase in breast cancer. Every single one. When you have 22 studies that say the exact same damn thing, you have to start saying, even though it's epidemiologic studies, this is real, it's a real effect. Now, I don't want to get the wrong impression here. Most breast cancers are from the BRCA gene. 40% of human breast cancers are from the BRCA gene, which is a genetic defect. So 40% are from genetic defect. If your family has a strong history of breast cancer, that's probably the reason. But for the other 60%, a 14% increase overall means a 30% increase in breast cancer from light pollution. Think about that. Here's one of my favorite studies from David Blast from Tulane. You can't do this on human subjects, you can do it on rats. So what he did is he took nude mice, which is a bred mice that'll accept transplants easily. Okay, not that they were not wearing clothes. So what happened was he put 20 human breast cancers under the skin of these mice, 120 mice, and he broke them up into quintiles as well. So mice that were exposed to a normal daylight cycle, at night the lights were off, this is the rate at which the breast cancer grew. Like mice that were exposed to a minimum, 0.02 microwatts, this is a minimum. I mean, even a nightlight in the bedroom was more than that. The breast cancer started growing faster. More light, breast cancer grew faster. Till the constant light, meaning the rats never had any night at all, the cancers literally exploded out of their chest. Okay, so the direct correlation between light suppressing the melatonin and the rate of cancer growth in these mice. You can't do this on human subjects, obviously. But I have no doubt that it would match if we could. No one here wants to volunteer for that experiment. Okay. So, pancreatic cancer, a more recent one. That's a endocrine related organ. I wasn't aware of this one. I gave a talk to Houston, and there was a researcher from Texas there, and she published this paper recently. So 500,000 patients, and followed up 16 years. Quintiles again, highest line exposure had the highest increase in pancreatic cancer, side of the University of Texas. Artificial light and thyroid cancer, same thing. Thyroid is an endocrine cancer, increases by almost 50% for light at night. Light at night and obesity, increased rates. 12 to 19% higher odds of developing obesity if you have light shining in your bedroom at night from street light. Because of the increase in diabetes, not because of the light itself, because of the increase in diabetes, the rate of strokes and heart attacks also increases. Not surprisingly. Carotid atherosclerosis. The only study I could find with that was an indoor study, but I have no doubts that it would be related out to it. No one's done that study yet. So, retinal pigment is affected. So if you're constantly exposed to blue light at night, it affects the retina and causes retinal deterioration. Excessive illumination in the retina at night, especially blue light, intense blue light at night, like from a constant TV screen, increases the amount of retinal degeneration, macular degeneration as you age. This is NGC 6781. Isn't that a great planetary? All right, so environmental impacts from land. We're not the only species on Earth. It turns out pretty much everything on Earth is affected by light pollution. Everything. One of the best researchers of that is Travis Longport from the University of Southern California. And he has done a number of studies, but we now know from many researchers that it affects plants, insects, birds, fish, even 60% of invertebrates improving. And he published the paper in Nature, the long paper in 2018. And I love this quote by him at the end of the long paper. If a lighting environmental effect on a particular species has not yet been documented, it's probably because it has not yet been studied. In every case where a study has been performed, you could not find an exception on this. An effect has been determined and that's a quote by Travis Longport at the end of that particular Nature 2018. So basically what he's saying is, if you can't find a research paper on a particular species because we haven't studied it yet. He has yet to study a species where we haven't documented an effect. And that goes all the way down the line. So animals can experience disorientation, artificial lights disrupt interactions, including predation, including mating. For example, a simple case would be lightning bugs. How many people have lightning bugs in the backyard? You have lightning bugs? You all live in rural areas?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's why. Okay, because anywhere near light pollution, the male and female lightning bug can't see each other anymore, and therefore you get no baby lightning bugs. That's why they're in steep decline in the US. I'm impressed with me, they live in rural areas. So again, numerous species are affected by light. And then the lights are worse the higher the CCT, color correlated temperature. Okay, so here's what you want. This is light as it goes sideways across. It turns out that with 5,000 K lights, you can see it up to 50 miles away, whereas 2,700 K lights about half that distance. Another reason to limit and shield them properly and use the right color correlated temperature. Insect declines. I was at a conference where one of the speakers just before me, the title of this talk was why is your windshield clean?
Yeah.
Didn't think of it that way before, but he's correct. Back when I was in the 80s, I was having to clean my windshield. I hardly ever have to do that anymore. Why? Because we killed them all off. And not just by insecticides. Light pollution affects the insects. And we're in what we would call an insect apocalypse right now. 40% of all the insects on Earth compared to 30 years ago are dead. 40% are gone. And that affects pollination. It affects our food production. It affects food for birds and other animals, which is a major problem. And that's why many farms now have to import bees to pollinate their crops, because we're killing off all the insects. So global change insects, however, infrequently recognized a potential contributor. And light at night, therefore, affects crop production. So here's an extreme example on the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. The mayflies come out in May, and normally they become fish food after they lay their eggs. Instead, they're attracted to an intense light that was across this bridge. They've since taken it down. But this is what would happen within a few days. All the insects go to the light, fish don't get food, no baby insects get laid, and they have nothing but dead insects you gotta sweep up. Turtles. In Florida, about 25 years ago, the turtle population was just about extinct. And a researcher from University of Southeast Florida, South Florida Atlantic, that's what it's called. Anyways, he finally figured out the turtles hatch around midnight during full moon. And they're programmed to go to where the light is. The light is almost always on the water with the moon. They would go to the water, you have lots of new turtles. The problem is, all the people in Florida who are moving down from the north decided it isn't it wonderful to be light up the waves at night so we can sleep more soundly. Problem with that is the turtles hatch, they go to the street, and they all get run over and die, they never make it to the water. He figured out, because everyone assumed the turtle population is due to toxins, people. It turned out it was only the lights. Finally, they passed a law saying you can't keep the lights on the beach all night long. Turtle population is kind of roaring back. Same thing with fireflies, same thing with pollinators, same thing with birds. Here's one of my favorite examples. So there's this bridge in Northern California, right near the Oregon border, that used to have salmon run up the river and spawn there. So some idiot thought it would be great if we lit up the underside of the bridge. It had nothing to do with traffic. Underside of the bridge, because it looks pretty from his house about 5 miles away. I'm not making this up. They bought it, they put these lights up. Within a few years, the LEDs were installed. Within 2 years, the salmon run, they used to count 15,000, went down to 800, nearly extinct. Someone finally figured it out. They then shut off the lights during the salmon run, and the salmon population has since come back. Unfortunately, they kept the lights on the rest of the year, which is way too bad. I don't understand what the purpose of it is. But at least they recognized that the lights were killing off the salmon. And numerous examples of that through the years. How much time?
5 minutes.
Oh, I have plenty of time, no problem, I'm just about done. So light pollution on free living birds does the same thing. We kill millions of birds every year because of light pollution. 10 to 40 million birds are directly related to that. In fact, anyone know the the pyramid in Las Vegas, it shines that light up in the sky. Yeah, that looks so. Well, here's a dirty little secret most people don't realize. They have a team that goes out every morning at sunrise to sweep up all the dead birds that have died overnight, circling the stupid thing until they're exhausted and just fall dead. That's their job, clean up the dead birds so the customers don't see them when they go to the casino. And it's all because of that light that can be seen from literally 100 miles away. It can be seen by birds flying.
It's in the desert.
Yeah, well, it's a transshipment for the birds. And here's another good example. It's basically species you wouldn't even think about, okay, that are affected by light pollution. Also in Florida, you heard about red algae. It causes toxin in the water, right? And it's getting worse every year. No question, most of that's due to the fertilizers for the beach sugars, the center of Florida, and it gets into the water and goes out, and then that phosphates and nitrogen makes the algae move. But here's a little known fact. There are zooplankton deep in the water that live only in the dark, and at night, every single night, they go to the surface to eat. And what do they eat? They eat algae, except if there's even a shred of light. Because if there's any light whatsoever, they don't come up. They either go elsewhere or they stay down deep. Okay, so if you just shut off the damn lights into the water, the zooplankton will come up and eat some of that algae. That's their food. Trees, again, things you wouldn't expect. If the light is shining on a tree, it thinks it's still early fall instead of late fall. And when half the tree is sending out hormones to shut down, and half the tree is sending out hormones that we've got time left, the tree lives only about 2/3 of its natural lifespan and dies early. Purdue University did a study on that and showed that all these species are affected by light pollution. So I ask you, want to live here or here? I shouldn't have to ask this crowd, right? Boydell 3 is about down here, and you see about 6,000 stars. Most people are living in 1, 2, or 3, and you see this many stars. Huge decline. I'd rather live here than here. I don't have to spend much time. Dark Sky Oasis, that's part of the UN report. I wasn't involved with that section of it. They're trying to preserve dark sky places for a number of reasons. And Roland, which stands for Responsible Outdoor Lighting Ignite, this is a European initiative. I've given them a couple of talks. The last one was 2022. And the Europeans were really on board. They're way ahead of us in many respects. In fact, the Czech Republic, all outdoor lights by decree now have to be fully shielded and 3,000 or below. And Czech Republic has actually some pretty good light pollution laws. The worst is the Netherlands. You can see them from the surface of the moon. Netherlands is way overlit. They're trying to change that. Well, let me skip that. But the IES finally came around after sending me death threats for a few years. In 2018, the person who was most in favor of excess lighting got deposed. I won't get his name. I won't start a fight here. But he got deposed and they put in something much more friendly. And the latest iteration of the illuminating handbook now pretty much agrees with the AMA, though they won't admit it. But their lighting procedures now. Here's the problem though. Most lighting engineers are not trained as lighting engineers. The septic designers or mechanical engineers or electrical engineers. There's only 6 universities in the entire country that give out a lighting engineer. So most of the engineers who call themselves lighting engineers know no more about lighting than you do. I kid you not. And the ones that are doing that, you know, these things cost like $300 each. So they're still using manuals that are 20 years out of date. So when I go to a meeting and lighting engineer says something, the first thing I ask them is, what version are you using? And it's, I don't know, 2005. And okay, why don't you get the latest one, which says everything you're saying is completely incorrect now. So use that. Ask them specifically what version you're using of the manual. They say that they're going by recommended, and ask them what their degree is. So we could be very surprised at the answer. I'm not afraid to embarrass engineers. All right, here's something recognized. And 891, oh no, it's 4565. All right, I'll stop there.
Oh, my.
So if you want to download any of the studies, you can go to my no, not my here, www.marimodmd.com. Go to the third, fourth column down is is lighting, and you'll see a number of studies you can download, especially on the AMA stuff. And this is where you can get the the UN report, and that's available as well. But I also got it on my site.